Merry Christmas. As you can see, we still have all our nativity sets up behind me. We're still celebrating Christmas in the church. And in this week between the Feast of the Holy Family leading up to Epiphany, for daily Mass, the church gives us a whole bunch of texts from John. We get a deep dive into the Gospel of John and also a deep dive into the first letter of John. Now, you may have started at some point in your life and picked up the Gospel of Matthew or even picked up the Gospel of John and read through it. But I'm guessing it's less likely that you said, oh, I'm going to read the first letter of John for the week. So why is the church giving it to us now? Especially because it seems kind of like a downer, right? Today's first reading, Beloved, who is the liar? Whoever denies that Jesus is the Christ. Whoever denies the Father and the Son, this is the Antichrist. Anyone who denies the Son does not have the Father, but whoever confesses the Son has the Father as well. So in 1 John, we get the first use of the idea of someone being the Antichrist. And we have this seemingly abstract, seemingly useless theological speculation here on who's denying who, and who's the Father, and who's the Son. But in some ways, that's the whole point. And in fact, today we also celebrate the feast of St. Basil the Great and Gregory Nazianzen, two of the most important theologians of the 4th century, who were asking the same questions that some people in John's community were asking and arguing about, and that we're asking through today is, okay, so Jesus has been born, well, now what? Who is this person? What's their relationship to God? What's their relationship to us? Those were the fights of the first 5 centuries of Christianity. And in some ways, those are still some of the arguments today that theologians ask about, think about, try to answer better. Now, theologians, myself included, sometimes get a bad rap because we take something simple that God was incarnate in Jesus and make it complicated with words like consubstantial with the Father from the Creed, or that seem irrelevant. But what Gregory and Basil and First John and theologians and teachers today are trying to point out is not trying to make something simple more complicated, but trying to protect something simple and crucial, trying to use language and philosophy and words to wrap our heads just a little bit about the mystery that somehow Jesus' incarnation was not just a nice story about a baby, was not just even something important like God communicating a message to us, but that somehow in this experience of Jesus of Nazareth become Jesus the Christ, that somehow in this experience God has visited us, come to be with us, lives with us, likes us enough to show up in person. So the arguments that First John and that the 4th century are about is Jesus really God? Why does that matter? And it seems at first like it doesn't matter that much, but when we study it and think about it, we say, okay, this is not just God sending another messenger, as important as those messengers were. This is not someone speaking on God's behalf, as important as those people have been and will be and are. This is not just someone who has some good ideas about God. But this is somehow God entering into our world and entering into our lives, becoming close to us. The medieval mystic Julian of Norwich, who's one of the first texts we know was written by a woman in English, she talks in her showings, her revelations, about how God in Jesus becomes homely with us. And when she says homely, she doesn't mean ugly. She means literally at home. Kind of like a king who shows up and has a cup of tea in your house while he's wandering through a village. Kind of like somebody important showing up and making themselves at home. That's what John and Basil and Gregory and Julian are all trying to preserve as this simple, beautiful mystery that we don't quite get. And if we got it, it wouldn't be a great mystery. The mystery that somehow God has made himself at home with us through Jesus, in a lasting way, in a way that we experience through the Word, a way we experience through the sacraments, it's a way we experience through the people of the church who make Jesus Christ present over and over and over again in new times and places. But at the bulk of it, we have this idea that we have, through our access to Jesus of Nazareth, through our relationship to Jesus Christ, we are not just having a relationship with somebody speaking on behalf of God, but somehow God himself showed up for a cup of tea, or miraculously showed up for a little bit of bread, a little bit of wine, a little bit of storytelling, and that is now the new center of our lives. So we spend a week in the church trying to figure this out, getting ready for Epiphany, which is sort of Jesus coming out into the world and saying a little bit more about who he is on the Feast of the Baptism of the Lord. The rest of our church year now is, okay, Jesus is born, now what? And as we continue to follow the liturgical year and the scriptures that come with it, we'll keep asking that question. And you can ask that question. Now that Jesus is born, now that God is with us, now what? What are you called to do? How are you called to receive that gift of God's presence? And how are you called to then share the love that comes from that with those around you? So Merry Christmas, happy almost Epiphany, and find ways to welcome Christ into your home this week.